Hello, trumpet friends. So, I'm early to a gig, and I think I've mentioned before that I'm always early. Well, at least I try to be. This time I'm exceptionally early. I got into the neighborhood 2 hours before I was supposed to get here, and I got myself a coffee, which I'm trying to cut back on. And then now I'm in the parking lot. I'm at the River Oaks Country Club. That's probably the most prestigious country club in Houston. They say this is old money, but really, I don't think it really works like that. But anyway, that's where I'm at tonight. And I wanted to talk a little bit to you about jazz motifs. And I really want to get you to open your mind. Those of you who are jazz players, I want to try to get you to open your mind to a musical aspect that people have been tiptoeing around. And it's almost as, well, I shouldn't say almost as if, it is. It's a topic that's not even on their radar, and in my opinion, it's the most important jazz topic there is. Jazz motifs, and you know what's, okay, so the reason I'm talking about this today is I just read an article, and I'm not going to tell you who it is, because this is, one thing you'll know is, at least I try not to bash anybody. That's not who I am. There are times when I do feel it's important to speak up against an idea, but I do that without speaking up against the person. In this case, there's an entire field of study missing out of jazz education. Gone. People don't even talk about it. It's not even on their radar. And the reason I'm talking about this now is I read this article. There was a transcription, beautiful transcription, by the way, and famous, one of the greats, right? One of the people, the forefathers of jazz. A 2-page transcription, and the guy is tiptoeing around the fact that at least 1/3, maybe closer to 2/5 of the material doesn't fit the changes. Now, he's not saying that, right? Because you're not allowed to say that some famous dude improvised this wonderful solo that doesn't exactly fit the changes, right? Because in jazz education world, everything is all about playing the right scale on the right chord, which is stupid. I can say that now because I'm not part of jazz academia. And you know what? This is at the forefront of my mind right now because I'm in the process of republishing a book that I wrote in the early 90s, my Gerald Hunter book. It was Gerald Hunter. Gerald was a blind trumpet player in El Paso. He played in the style of Roy Eldridge, and I used to go and sit at the clubs underage. Back in those days, you could kind of get away with that. I used to sit and I'd watch him for the whole night. Because and he played different. He didn't play like someone who was, and I don't mean this as an insult. It's an insult to other people. He didn't play like somebody who was educated. He didn't play scales over chords. He didn't play chord patterns or arpeggios. What he played was music. He played stuff that communicated. And And in the process of studying the way he played, I learned about jazz motifs. Now, I don't know if other people call them jazz motifs. I settled on the term jazz motif as a result of reading Hal Crook's book. But the way I'm talking about jazz motifs is not the same as what he talks about. Okay? I use that language because nobody's talking about this. I'm the only one I know, and I don't mean to sound arrogant. It's just I'm a little frustrated as a jazz teacher. I'm frustrated. You know, I can go to schools and teach this stuff, and they'll pat me on the back and they'll say, you know what, we've been trying to tell the students this. And I'm like, no, you haven't. And that's what I want to tell you right now. I know I'm a little bit all over the map right now. But this is what I want for this video. Open your mind. Start seeing the motifs as valuable. Okay, so this solo, let me get back to the solo. This solo was so rich in jazz motivic language. 2 pages. I like to look at solos in terms of percentage. How much percentage of filler in ratio with percentage of motivic content, right? So when I look at, for example, musicians like Charlie Parker or Clifford Brown, I'm seeing not 80 to 90% motivic content and 10 to 20% filler in their solos. Okay, so what is motivic content? Motivic content is usually in jazz, it's going to be a 2-beat pattern. Okay, I shouldn't use the word pattern because that's what people use when they're talking about scales. And I don't want to give that impression. It's not, and that's that article that I read was talking about how this great jazz musician was playing chromatic patterns. Tiptoeing around the fact that the guy's playing motifs. Okay, a chromatic pattern is something that has symmetry. And a motif, now you can have symmetric motifs, but most jazz motifs are not symmetric. So, for example, if I play C, F, D, D sharp, E, da 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 dum, C, F, D, D sharp, E, that is a common jazz motif. You're going to see it in Charlie Parker. You're going to see it in Clifford Brown. You're going to see it in Freddie Hubbard. It's across the spectrum. That's a 5-note motif that just about everybody plays. Now, what's going to happen is you're going to have somebody who can't see motifs. They're completely blind to motivic content, right? And they're going to say, let's say that C, F, D, D sharp, E was over a D minor chord, D minor 7. They're going to say, well, it started on the 7th, it goes to the 3rd, and then it goes to the root, and then there's a chromatic passing tone. That's how they analyze this stuff. And there's, you know what, it's kind of sort of like that saying, too close to the trees to see the forest. They're completely missing the fact that that motif, that same 5 notes in that exact order, used rhythmically in that exact placement, is used across the board. Jazz players all over the place. Here's another one. Now I'm doing these in the key of C, right? B, C sharp, B, B flat, A flat, G. Da, dee, dee, Da dee da da. Oh, I'm sorry. B, C sharp, B, B flat, A flat, G. That's what I said. Da ya da ba da. Right? Da ya da ba da. Now, that can either be used as a third to the C sharp is a sharp 11, back to the third, to the flat sharp 9, to the flat 9, to the fifth, or the root of the the fifth of the next chord. But it also works as over the E flat 7, so that you're doing starting on the flat 9. Okay? And that's how people are looking at it. They're saying, oh, look, he's playing this flat 9 or this sharp 11. Wrong. He's playing a motif that fits over this and that. And you know what? How you know he's playing a motif and not playing some upper extension of the chords? Is he'll do it over the one chord. Now you could say, oh, well, he's playing it over the one chord, but it's a... he's letting the 5 chord suspend over the 1 chord. Really? You guys are tiptoeing around what it really is. He's playing a jazz motif. He's communicating in the jazz language. You know, I don't like the word pet peeve, but this is one of mine. It's like John the Baptist of the jazz world, right? I'm speaking about stuff that nobody else it's not even on their radar. I want you guys to open your Omni book. Open your Omni book and look for 5-note patterns that exist. Charlie Parker, I'm talking about the Charlie Parker Omni book. Back in my day, that was the only Omni book, right? When I was in school. Charlie Parker, sometimes in the same solo, would play the same 5-note motif 5, 6, 7 different times, which totally blows out of the water. A great jazz player doesn't repeat himself. But that's a different subject for a different day. And I know I've talked about this in another video. This is the rant version, okay? This is the rant version of this topic. The way I see the motifs, and there's musical power in this, okay? There's more musical power in motivic improvisation than there will ever be in technical improvisation, okay? There's more musical power because of what I'm about to tell you. I like to look at the, better check the time. Okay, I got time. I like to look at a similarity between spoken language and jazz improvisation. So on the one hand, we'll have a story, which is the equivalent of a jazz solo, right? And I know I put this in the other video, but a lot of you haven't watched it. A story is a solo, a paragraph is a chorus, a sentence is a phrase. What's next? This is where it's all off of your radars. You guys don't even know this exists. The equivalent to a spoken word in jazz improvisation is a motif. Usually two beats long with a downbeat on the third beat. And I'll have another video later talking about that downbeat. All right? Not time to go into this here. But yes, that's what the equivalent is of a spoken word. And we use, we reuse motifs in our jazz language the same way we reuse words in our spoken language. How many times have I used the word the in this video so far? How many times have I used the word language? How many times have I used the word motif? You cannot communicate without reusing words. Well, it's the same thing is true with motivic improvisation. We have a vocabulary, as jazz improvisers, we have a vocabulary of literally hundreds, if not thousands, of motifs. And we string these motifs together to make phrases the same way we string words together to make sentences. That's motivic improvisation. And that, I told you earlier, that's more powerful than what I would call technical improvisation. Technical improvisation is when you play this scale over that chord. Technical improvisation is when you play arpeggios that highlight the upper extensions. That's technical improvisation. That doesn't communicate to the audience the way motivic improvisation does, and I believe that the reason is when we improvise motivically, the audience responds the same way to our improvisation that they would respond to spoken language, because we're using words, jazz words. We're using words in a jazz format. That's why you can put, all those solos that the greats played back in those days. You can put words, lyrics to those solos. Because the material they were playing was motivic, and it lines up perfectly with spoken language. So yes, that's going to make more of a human connection to the audience. Audience doesn't want to hear you play a bunch of scales. If that's the thought that's originating in your head, you're not reaching the audience the way you could. All right? And for that reason, this whole motif thing is such a big deal to me. I have gotten to where I dread listening to musicians. I would much rather hear somebody even play in the wrong key, but play motivically and communicate that way, than to hear someone play all the right notes. The truth of the matter is, you go through the Omnibook, you go through Clifford Brown's transcriptions, and you tell me how many wrong notes are in those solos. That's because they're playing motivically. They're not trying to outline the chords. Now, I'm not saying they're not playing the changes, don't get me wrong. But the way we see playing the changes is backwards. We think that the music originates with the chords, and that the material that we create in our improvisation needs to somehow match the chords. That's backwards. Our motivic language is what creates the harmony. This solo that I looked at today, what caused me to want to do this video, this solo had 4 measures where the tonal center was a complete perfect fourth off. Now, nobody's going to say that this guy was doing it wrong. He's one of the greats, one of the historical greats of our time. I mean, not our time, of the history of jazz. Okay, nobody's going to say he wasn't playing the changes. But that's why this guy had to tiptoe around. The guy who wrote it you know, he had his description at the beginning of it, and he's tiptoeing around because he doesn't have this. I'm assuming, okay, and this is why I don't want to mention any names, because it sounds like I'm insulting him, and I'm not. You can't know what you don't know, right? I mean, really, if nobody has ever brought up anything about these motifs, how are you supposed to know this? You know, this motif stuff is so important. I actually compose this way now in my classical stuff, because that's how you connect to it. That's how your music connects to the people. Anyway, that's a tangent. Let me finish this up. I almost want to beg you to start opening your eyes and looking at the transcriptions. And I'm not talking about the more recent stuff, because I think the more recent stuff has been infected with decades of bad jazz education. So you might have something that sounds good. I don't consider it good, but I mean, it might sound good to you. And it might be all that reference the scale to the chord thing. Okay, so go back to Charlie Parker, go back to Lee Morgan, Clifford Brown, go back to Dizzy Gillespie, go back to those guys up through the hard bop era. Go and look at those guys and look for this. Instead of looking for scale patterns, instead of looking for arpeggios, look for these motifs that repeat. That's how you know it's a motif, is it's used more than once. Look for these motifs, and I don't mean used more than once by that same musician. I'm talking about stuff that's used more than once across the board. Stuff that Charlie Parker did, stuff that Clifford Brown did, stuff that Freddie Hubbard did. There are, now, not all of us are going to always use the same words when we speak, correct? Someone might say correct, and someone else might say right. And it's the same way in jazz. Not everyone's going to use every motif, but there are common motifs. And that's what I want you to look for. Look at the music and see that. I would say start with Charlie Parker, because you can get the Omni book and it's right there. It's right there, as plain as the nose on your face. Okay? Please. There's a whole world of music out there that you're missing. Now, I have a way that I teach that students can learn to improvise more motivically. And maybe in a future video we might talk more about that. I really am holding back on that, because I have to separate what I teach to my students so that there's some value in the lessons. I want to keep some separation between what I teach in these videos and what we do in the lessons. It's just professionally irresponsible for me to take what people are paying for and give it all away for free. That's just not right. It's not fair to the people who are paying for it. But I do have, and maybe what I could do is not give you the method, but give you the concept. That's different, right? And then you can figure out your own method. But yes, this video is just now about opening your eyes, hopefully. And don't take that, don't be offended by me saying that. I know a lot of people would be offended. But would you be offended if something extremely important was you were missing something extremely important and someone pointed it out to you, and now all of a sudden your life is better? So don't be offended. All right? Real jazz improvisation, I truly believe this, isn't about playing the right notes over the chords. It's about speaking through the jazz language, which is basically a vocabulary of motifs. Okay? That's what I have for you. I'm going to try to post this video directly from my phone. And if I can do that, there might be more of these more convenient, because I do, like I said, I get to my gigs early every time. Tonight is a debutante ball. I've been playing at this country club for, I don't know, I think it's 35 years. And every time I drive up the way, I think about all the wonderful bands I've played with here. And most of them, the leaders have either retired, or they've died, or the bands have stopped working. So it's sort of a bittersweet experience whenever I come to these old places that I used to play a lot at. Because I do miss, I don't like nostalgia. I don't believe in nostalgia. I think it's a deadly emotion. I really believe that. That doesn't mean I don't experience it. And there are so many good musical memories I have from just these, not just this venue, but venues all over the city, that those leaders that I played there with are gone for one reason or another. And it's bittersweet, This band I'm playing with today, I've only been playing with for a year. And I like working with them, don't get me wrong. I enjoy working with them. But I miss the other guys too. Great bands all over the years. Anyway, God bless you guys. Like I said, try to look at some transcriptions and see what I'm talking about. I'm sure you'll see it. If I have to, I will analyze a solo for you so you can see what I'm talking about. All right? Maybe that should be a future jazz project on the video channel. If that's something you guys would like, let me know and I'll take care of it. All right? Anyway, that's it.